Alright everyone, today we'll be taking a look how to edit this waterfall. The end result should look something like this. Let's just jump into Lightroom. So the first thing that I notice is that this picture is very pink. I'm not too sure why, but we can easily correct this using the tint slider right here. So I'd say plus 18 makes it look a lot more natural. And we can even increase the temperature a little bit to give it that sunset look. I did take this at sunset, so in real life, I think the colors were a lot more amplified. All right, I'm not going to mess with exposure or contrast until I finish the highlight, shadows, whites, and blacks. So remember that highlights affect the majority bright parts of the image. So when I decrease this, the waterfall in the sky is affected. And as you can see, a lot of the detail from the waterfalls being recovered when I decrease the highlights. So I'm going to decrease it by a good amount. 54 looks fine. The shadows, I think the image is relatively dark, so I'm going to increase that by a good amount as well. I say like plus 70 is fine. So for the whites affects the brightest of the image. So these streaks on the waterfall, we can increase a little bit, so it gives it that good pop. I think the blacks are a little bit too dark in this image, so I'm going to increase it by a good amount as well. Alright, so increasing the black point really decreases the contrast. So first thing I want to do is increase the contrast a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit more contrast using the tone curve as well. And then I think the image is still kind of dark, so we're going to increase that by a little bit. Okay, so we're going to go to the tone curve. I think for this image, an S curve will look nice just to increase that contrast a little bit. So it's very subtle, but it adds a little bit contrast. So that's before and after. So far, this is the before and this is the after. We added a lot of depth already. Alright, so in the presence tab over here, I think texture and clarity will complement the photo very nicely. So plus 20 for both of them. Be sure not to overdo this because if you crank these up, it looks very artificial, as you can see. Same with the clarity. See, look at that. I don't think we really need dehaze because there's not much haze in the image, but we can increase the vibrance by a little bit. Let's say 20, 21, it looks good. We'll add custom saturation to the image later on when we get to HSL over here. Okay, so moving on to hue. I think the hue looks fine. If you want to customize your hue, this is all stylistic by the way, you can just press this button over here and you can scroll. And if you want to make more autumny colors, you can just make moss orange if you want. But I think it looks fine. Maybe we can even decrease it a little bit so it looks like that. For saturation, I definitely want to amplify the greens and the yellows. For luminance, I definitely want to give yellows and greens a boost as well. Greens not so much, probably yellows a little bit more. Okay, I think that looks great. Split toning, if you guys want to add specific colors to just your highlights, like a little bit red tint, you can do that through split toning. But personally, I don't really use split toning because it's not my style, but you can if you want to give it artistic touch to it. Okay, so for details, I usually hit Alt and then I mask until I see enough lines. So these are as you can see the outline of the rocks, you can see the outline of the moss, the waterfalls beginning, the logs. So I think 88 is a good masking point and 40 is fine. Noise reduction, I don't think there's too much noise in this image, so I'm not going to add any noise reduction. Remember, the more noise reduction you add, the more detail you lose. So look at that compared to no noise reduction. Color, there might be some color noise, so I'm just going to add maybe 40. This does a better job of preserving detail. Okay, so for lens correction, this is super important. So as you can see up here, there's some chromatic aberration, so check that box. There's still a little bit, so I'm going to go into manual and then defringe. I'm going to add a 2 and that does the job. profile correction. So I'm using a manual lens here, so the lens profile is not necessarily accurate. If you're using like a Canon kit lens, like a 18-55 Canon, you know, it's going to be accurate. You can just, it'll automatically choose it for you. But I'm using a manual lens in this case. It's a very obscure one as well, so I'm going to go to Venus Optics, and as you can see, I think it makes the image a little bit too bright, so we can decrease the vignetting and we can decrease the distortion a little bit. But once again, if you're using a mainstream lens like any of the big brands like Canon, even brands like Tokina, Sigma, Tamron, if you use the automatic profile, it should do a good job. Alright, I don't really do anything with transform. I think it looks fine. Effects, I might even add some vignetting just to bring the viewer's image into the waterfall. So I think ±9 looks fine. Okay, so moving down to calibration, you can use this as an artistic approach as well. A lot of people like to use the blue primary and just shift it to the left and give it that autumn, that orange blue autumn look, but it's not my style, so we're going to skip it for now. You can totally use it if you want to, but I'm not going to. You can also change the tint if you want. You know, I think that even looks pretty good, so I'm going to make the tint -11 here. Alright, so up to this point we finished all the basic adjustments. We just went through this page and we just filled everything out. So now we're going to add custom dodging and burning through these three things up here. So this is the graduated filter, the radial filter, and the brush. So we can selectively make certain areas that we want brighter or darker. So we're going to start off with the graduated filter. I'm going to make 2 graduated filters here to bring the viewer's eyes into the waterfall. So I can drag and drop here, and then I can decrease the exposure by -0.5. I'm going to duplicate this guy, put him on the other side. Alright, looks good. I can even create one here because this area is pretty dark. Alright, looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to use radial filters to dodge the areas that I think need brightening. So these rocks over here, we can definitely add some brightness to. Just increase the exposure by like 0.4, and we can add some clarity to it to bring it out. Yeah. Alright, and we can add one at the log, just like a very long one over here, and we can add one up here. One on the other side as well, right over here. I'll probably add one under the waterfall. I think that'll complement the darkness over here well. And last one right here. Alright, I think that looks pretty good. Now we're going to make radial filters that darken the image. So I'm going to have a negative exposure. So right over here looks pretty dark. Right under here looks pretty dark. Over here looks pretty dark as well. Alright, so I think that looks pretty good. So this is before and after. And with the radial filters, this is before and after. Before, after. Okay, so now we're going to use the brush to add some highlights to the water. I think the water looks great, and I think we can add a little bit more brightness to the water. So I'm going to use the brush. Make sure you have auto mask on, and we're just going to paint the brush over the water. So you can press O anytime to see what you have selected. So auto mask does a pretty good job. We can even select some of this if you want. I'm going to decrease the flow to make sure it's not as strong up here so I don't overexpose it. Alright, I think that looks good. Press O again to make the red disappear, and we can increase the exposure a little bit. Don't overdo it. Alright. Before, after, before, after. All right, so I think that looks great. Click done. One last thing, we're gonna add a radial filter up here. So this is what gives the waterfall a soft look. So I'm gonna make a small filter, increase the exposure, decrease clarity and texture. And we can even add temperature. And then we're gonna duplicate this, make it bigger. All right, done. There we go. So we have light coming from the top here. All right, and one last thing, if you're going to use this for Instagram, Instagram is 4:5, so we can hit that crop button, aspect 4:5, and then crop accordingly. I don't think this branch over here really contributes to the image. All right. I think that's it. If you guys enjoyed this video, please smash that like button. If you have any questions, just comment them down below and I'll answer them for you. Be sure to be tuned for the next video. Subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching.